I crashed through the hospital door so fast I barely felt my feet hit the floor. Someone had called from a blocked number. "Your husband. Critical condition. Come now." Then the line went dead. Inside, everything was chaos. Stretchers flying past, alarms blaring, people shouting orders I couldn't make sense of. I pushed through the crowd, breathless, desperate, praying they were wrong. That's when a nurse lunged at me, gripped my arm so hard it left nail marks. Her eyes were wild, terrified. She whispered, "Hide. Please, hide. It's a trap." I froze. A trap? For who? Then I looked into the operating room, and my heart stopped. There was a man on the table, wearing my husband's ring. Before everything collapsed, it was just an ordinary afternoon. Quiet, predictable, the kind of day you forget by nightfall. I remember standing at the kitchen counter, staring at the half-made cup of coffee I'd abandoned earlier that morning. My husband, Daniel, had left for work in a rush, late again, mumbling something about a meeting going wrong, his tie crooked, his hair still wet from the shower. I teased him, smoothed down his collar, kissed his cheek, and asked if he'd be home for dinner. His answer had been a distracted, "We'll see, I might be late." Lately, everything was late. We'd been off for weeks. Small arguments that didn't matter, cold silences that did. But underneath all the tension was this steady, unshakable truth. I loved him. And I believed, no matter how many storms we were quietly weathering, that he still loved me too. I reached for my coffee, about to finally take a sip when my phone buzzed on the counter. Blocked number. I almost didn't answer. Blocked numbers usually meant telemarketers or wrong calls. But something in my chest tightened. Maybe instinct. Maybe dread. I wiped my hands on a towel and picked up. "Hello?" A man's voice, shaky, rushed, came through the speaker. "Is this Daniel's wife?" A chill ran through me. "Yes? Who is this?" There was a chaotic noise in the background, machines, shouting, footsteps. "You need to come," the voice said. "Your husband, there's been an accident. It's critical." He exhaled sharply. "You need to come now." My grip tightened around the phone. "Wait, where? What happened? Is he—" But the line cut off. No goodbye, no explanation, just dead silence. I stared at the screen as if it would light back up and give me answers, but it all showed was the same thing. Blocked number. My heart pounded so violently it felt like my ribs were bending. "Daniel," I whispered, shaking. I didn't think. I didn't have time to. I grabbed my keys, barely locked the door, and sped out of the driveway so fast the tires screeched. The world blurred outside the windows. I kept replaying the call in my head, trying to convince myself that maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe it was someone else, someone with the same name. But the voice had said, "Your husband," not a man named Daniel. Your husband. Why a blocked number? Why no hospital name? Why cut the call? Every unanswered question gnawed at me as I raced through traffic, honking at cars that didn't move fast enough. My palms were sweating, my breath coming in short bursts. I tried calling Daniel's phone, but every attempt went straight to voicemail. I even tried calling his office. No answer. By the time I reached the hospital, my entire body felt like it was trembling from the inside out. I swung into the parking lot, barely remembering how I got there. The moment I stepped out of the car, my legs threatened to give out. But I kept moving. I had to. My husband needed me. The automatic doors slid open with a hiss, and everything inside erupted around me. Screams, running footsteps, doctors shouting orders. The air smelled like antiseptic and panic. I pushed through the chaos, breathless, scanning every face for someone who might know what was going on. No one looked at me. No one stopped. It was like the world had tilted, and I was just trying not to fall off its edge. "Excuse me," I called out to a passing nurse. "My husband, Daniel, someone called me." But she didn't even slow down. I moved deeper into the maze of hallways, searching for someone, anyone who could tell me where he was. My heart felt like a trapped bird slamming itself against my ribs. For a moment, I wondered if this was what a nightmare felt like, when everything spiraled out of control and you couldn't wake yourself up no matter how hard you tried. Then I saw him. Not Daniel, a nurse. She was standing in the middle of the hallway, frozen, staring straight at me. Her eyes were wide, too wide, like she'd just seen something unspeakable. Before I could speak, she rushed towards me, not ran, lunged, as if stopping me was the only thing keeping her alive. Her hands grabbed my arm so hard I gasped. "You can't be here. You shouldn't have come," she whispered, breath shaking. Her eyes darted around, panicked. "Hide, please, hide. It's a trap." A trap. The word punched the air out of my lungs. My husband," I stammered. "They said he was here. They said he was hurt." She shook her head rapidly, tears gathering in her eyes. "You don't understand. They're expecting you. You need to leave before what?" But she didn't finish, because just then, the hallway went eerily quiet. Lights hummed overhead, footsteps echoed from somewhere deeper inside, and something, instinct or terror, pulled me forward. I slipped past her, ignoring her whispering pleas, my heart ricocheting inside me as I reached the heavy double doors marked "Surgical Unit, Authorized Personnel." I pushed them open. The noise from the other side, the beeping, the low murmurs, the metallic clatter of instruments hit me like a wave. And as the doors shut behind me with a soft thud, sealing me inside the silent surgical hallway, a horrifying thought surfaced. What if the call wasn't meant to save my husband's life, but to lure me into something else entirely?
The hallway felt colder than any part of the hospital I'd passed through before. Too quiet, too controlled. As soon as the doors closed behind me, shutting out the chaos of the main ER, the air shifted, sterile, humming, thick with something I couldn't name. I took a step forward, my breath loud in my ears. "Please, don't go any farther." Her voice came from behind me. The same nurse, the one whose fingers had dug into my arms like she was holding on for dear life. She'd followed me in. She stood a few feet away now, wringing her hands, her face blotchy with fear. Her gaze kept darting to the far end of the corridor, like she expected someone, or something, to come around the corner at any moment. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered again. "You have to hide. Please, you weren't supposed to walk in." "Then tell me where my husband is," I demanded, my voice cracking more than I wanted to admit. She flinched at the word husband, not in surprise, in recognition. "I can't," she choked out. "If I say anything, they'll—" Before she could finish, the hallway lights flickered. Just once, a slow, sickly pulse, but it was enough to send a shiver crawling up my spine. The nurse backed up a step, like the walls themselves had moved. "Please, you need to leave before they check again. If they see you, if they know you're here—" "Who?" I whispered. Her lips trembled. She opened her mouth and closed it again. I took a shaky step toward her. "Was my husband brought in? Is he alive? Is he even here? Tell me something, anything." Her eyes glistened. "I'm trying to save you." "Save me? From what?" Before I could push her further, a low murmur drifted from the other end of the corridor, voices, several of them, hushed but tense. The nurse stiffened, grabbed my arm again, and yanked me toward a recess in the wall. "Don't move," she begged. "Don't speak. Don't breathe loud." I pressed back against the wall, heart pounding so hard I felt it in my teeth. The voices drew closer. 2 men stepped into view. Not doctors, not nurses. civilian clothes, dark jackets, earpieces I almost missed, moving like people who knew exactly where every camera was. They walked to a set of double doors, labeled Operating Theater 4, and stood guard. My stomach dropped. Why would civilians be guarding an operating room? One man lifted his wrist to his mouth and muttered something into a concealed mic. The other scanned the hallway slowly, mechanically, like a motion detector. The nurse whispered in the faintest breath, "They're watching for you. For me, not for anyone else. Why? Why me?" "I can't say," she began. "Yes, you can," I snapped softly, gripping her forearm. "You grabbed me. You warned me. You told me to hide. You know something. You know what's behind those doors." Her breathing turned ragged, and that was when I understood. She was more afraid of the truth than of the men guarding it. Something moved inside the OR. A faint shadow, a silhouette against the frosted glass window. My chest tightened, as if invisible hands were squeezing it. "What's happening in there?" I whispered. The nurse shook her head desperately. "If they see you, they'll finish what they started." "What does that mean? Finish what?" She stared at me like she was about to break entirely. "They needed you to come. That call," she swallowed, "it wasn't to help him. It was to bring you here." The words hit me like ice water. My husband, the call, the blocked number. This wasn't an accident. I had been summoned. "For what?" I asked hoarse. Her eyes filled with tears. "For the identification." My heart stuttered. Identification of what? She didn't answer. She just kept shaking her head, whispering apologies that made no sense. The men outside the OR door straightened suddenly. One pressed something on his earpiece. The other turned slightly, scanning the hall again. I was out of time. If I stayed hidden, I'd never get answers. If I stepped out, I might not walk back alive. But my fear wasn't stronger than the image of Daniel's smile, the sound of his laugh, the memory of his hand brushed against mine that morning. Love is a strange thing. It can make you bold, or reckless, or both. I stepped out. The nurse grabbed at me, too late. "No, don't!" But I walked straight past her, straight toward the guarded door, straight into the line of sight of the two men who turned toward me with cold, clinical precision. "Ma'am, you can't be in here," one said, tone flat. "I'm looking for my husband," I said firmly. "Someone called me. They told me he was inside." The men exchanged a look. Something silent passed between them. The one on the right stepped aside, not fully, but enough to reveal the window on the operating room door. Enough for me to see inside. And the moment my eyes met the figure on the table, my breath left my body entirely. Bruised, bandaged, unrecognizable, except for one thing. One impossible, horrifying thing. The ring. My husband's ring. The world tilted around me. That's when I saw the ring. For a heartbeat, for a single suspended second, I could only stare through the narrow window in the operating room door, my breath trapped somewhere deep in my chest. The ring. Daniel's ring. Gold, slightly worn at the edges, the tiny scratch across the surface from when he dropped it on our honeymoon balcony. The ring I'd held between my fingers every time we argued, reminding myself of the vows behind it. It was on the hand of the man lying motionless under the harsh surgical lights. My hand trembled as I reached for the door. The guards didn't stop me this time. One simply looked away, almost nervously, as if he didn't want to be part of whatever was about to unfold. The lock clicked when I pushed it open. Cold air washed over me the moment I stepped inside, smelling of antiseptic and metal, sterile, sharp, unforgiving. Machines beeped in the background, steady but low, like they didn't want to draw attention to themselves. Two surgeons stood on either side of the table. A nurse hovered near the IV pole. None of them looked up. It was wrong. All wrong. They should have turned when the door opened. They should have asked who I was. They should have reacted in any way at all. Instead, it was as if they already knew I was coming. I took a step closer. Then another. My heart pounded so violently it felt like it was shaking my ribs. The man's face. I tried to swallow, but my throat was dry. It was a mess of bruises and swelling, purple and black in places no face should ever be. A thick bandage covered part of his forehead. Cuts ran along his cheekbones. The nose was crooked, smashed as if from a terrible impact. If I didn't know better, if I didn't know the ring, the shape of those hands, the faint scar near the thumb from when Daniel burned himself grilling, I wouldn't have recognized him at all. Oh my God. My voice broke, a soft sound, barely a whisper. My knees weakened. I grabbed the edge of a rolling tray to stay upright. "Daniel," I said, choking back tears. "Baby, please wake up." He didn't move. Not even a twitch. The beeping from the heart monitor was steady, calm, too calm, like it belonged to someone at rest, not someone who'd supposedly been pulled from the wreckage of a critical accident. My eyes scanned downward, desperate for more proof, for anything that could tell me this horrifying shape was truly my husband. Then I saw it. The ID. A plastic hospital tag clicked to the sheet near his hip. My breath hitched. It had his name. Daniel Whitaker. Age, 36. Spouse, on record. Me. A sob tore from my chest, raw, involuntary. My hand flew to my mouth to trap it, but it escaped anyway. My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes until the whole room shimmered. "Daniel," I whispered again, stepping closer, reaching for his hand like instinct. But before I touched him, one of the surgeons finally moved. He didn't jump in surprise. He didn't ask who I was. He didn't shout about contamination or protocols. He simply leaned slightly toward the other surgeon and whispered, "She's early. Sedate her." The words didn't register at first. My brain refused to accept them. Sedate? Her? Me? The nurse by the IV pole stiffened but didn't argue. Her hand reached, not toward my husband, but toward a second syringe on a nearby tray. A cold wave of terror shot up my spine. This wasn't an accident site. This wasn't a rescue. These people weren't trying to save my husband. They were trying to keep me from asking questions. No. 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 I stumbled backward, my heart slamming against my ribs. One surgeon reached for something, maybe another syringe, maybe something worse, but adrenaline took over before I could think. I spun toward the door. It felt like I was moving underwater, everything muffled, slow, surreal. My shoulders slammed against a metal cart. Instruments clattered to the floor, a sharp, deafening sound that echoed across the sterile room. Someone shouted behind me. Feet scuffed against the tile. The nurse gasped. "She's running." I yanked the door open and threw myself into the hallway. The two civilian men snapped to attention, but I didn't wait to see their expressions. I barreled past them, fueled by fear more powerful than logic. One of them called out, "Ma'am, wait!" But I was already sprinting. My feet thudded against the cold floor, heartbeat roaring in my ears. Everything blurred, the walls, the lights, the shapes moving around distant corners. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly before me. Another flicker of lights. A shadow down the hall. A voice yelling for someone to stop me. Panic clawed up my throat. At the end of the hallway, I spotted a narrow door labeled Supply 3C, half ajar. I lunged toward it, slipped inside, and pulled it shut behind me just as footsteps thundered past outside. Inside the supply room, it was dark, except for a sliver of fluorescent light leaking through the bottom of the door. Shelves lined the walls, stuffed with linens, bandages, disinfectant bottles. Ordinary things in a room now holding extraordinary fear. I pressed my back against the cold metal shelving, chest heaving, tears streaking down my face. I covered my mouth to stop myself from making a sound. My body trembled uncontrollably, not from running, but from what I'd just heard, what I'd just seen. They were going to sedate me. They wanted me unconscious because they didn't want me knowing what was happening, because they didn't want me knowing who the man on that table really was. And in that cramped, silent room, with footsteps echoing faintly outside, one truth rose above all the others. If they caught me, I might never wake up again. I pressed my back against the cold metal shelves, trying to quiet the sound of my own breathing. The supply room was dim, lit only by a sliver of fluorescent light leaking through the cracked door. My hands shook uncontrollably, part fear, part shock, part the weight of what I had just seen. My husband, maybe my husband, lying on that table with a ring identical to his, a scar identical to his, an ID that matched his name. And yet, why were there men guarding the door? Why did that nurse whisper for me to hide? Why did a surgeon look at me like I wasn't supposed to be alive? My mind spun so violently I thought I might vomit. Outside the door, voices rose. At first, scattered, muffled, then clearer, sharper. I held my breath. The dose didn't take. A man's voice, older, stern. Dose? Another voice replied, lower, tense. I told you she'd come early. We needed more prep time. Prep time? For what? Footsteps paced. Equipment clattered. We need the wife's confirmation before proceeding. My heart dropped into my stomach. Me. They needed me. Confirmation for what? Consent? Verification? Some kind of sick ritual where I nod and they kill the man lying on that table? Or confirmation that the body was my husband? I covered my mouth, stifling a sob. My phone buzzed faintly against my thigh, but I didn't dare check it. Not now. Any sound could give me away. Then another voice spoke, this one calmer, almost chillingly neutral. Make sure the body looks convincing. She won't question it once she sees him up close. Convincing. Convincing? The word slammed into me like a punch. They weren't trying to save him. They weren't trying to treat him. They were staging something. Staging his death? Staging it for me. A cold numbness spread through my limbs. I pressed my fist against my mouth to keep from crying out. My fingers grazed my phone again. And in that moment, instinct took over, shaky but fierce. I pulled it out, tapped record, and slid it close to the crack in the door, letting their words seep into evidence. The voices sharpened. Once she signs, we finish the job. Signs? I hadn't signed anything. No one had even spoken to me yet, unless that was the plan. Get me confused, scared, then shove papers in front of me. A tray slammed down hard enough to make me flinch. Instruments rattled. Make sure he stays under. If he wakes again... A sound cut him off. A low, broken groan. My blood froze. That voice, raspy, pained, came from the operating table, from the man they claimed was my husband. Another groan, louder this time, a gasping inhale, like someone clawing their way back to consciousness. He was alive. Not stable, not sedated, not dying. Alive. The room erupted. Hold him down. He wasn't supposed to wake. Get another syringe. Now. I slapped my hand over my mouth so hard my teeth cut my lip. Tears blurred everything. My thoughts shattered. If he was alive, if they were trying to sedate him again, then whatever they planned for him, it wasn't medical. A thud shook the floor. Metal clattered. A man cursed. Restrain him. He saw her. He looked right at her before she ran. My breath caught. So he had seen me, which meant the man on the table was... No. I forced myself not to leap to conclusions. Not now. Fear could make anything seem true. I gripped the phone tightly, recording every second. The groaning turned into a muffled yell. Someone must have covered his mouth. That sound stilled something inside me, replaced my shaking with something else. Rage. Panic sharpened into purpose. I had to get him out. I had to get answers. I had to stay alive long enough to find both. I slid the phone back into my pocket and stepped away from the door just as the hallway outside felt eerily quiet. Too quiet. Someone was listening. Someone new. I pressed myself into the shadows. My heart thundered so loudly I thought it would give me away. A hand jiggled the closet handle. Once. Twice. Slowly. My lungs cramped from holding my breath. Then I heard it. Soft. Deliberate. Almost playful. A man chuckled. Wherever she's hiding, she won't get far. A pause. We need her alive. For now. Footsteps retreated. But I knew better. This wasn't over. Not even close. I pushed my back to the shelves, forcing myself not to collapse. My world had already shattered. But now another realization slid in like ice. If they were staging my husband's death, then someone, somewhere, wanted me widowed. Or worse, they wanted me next. And before this night ended, I was going to find out why. I waited 10 full minutes before slipping out of the supply closet. Only after the footsteps faded, the voices dispersed, and the hallway sank into an unnatural stillness. It wasn't safety. Nothing about this place felt safe. But the silence gave me a sliver of opportunity, and I clung to it like a lifeline. I crept along the corridor, every nerve screaming, listening for the soft shuffle of shoes or the crackle of radios. Nothing. Just the hum of flickering lights and the faint, rhythmic beeping from inside the operating room. My heart hammered as I approached the small observation window. Earlier, panic had blurred everything. Now I forced myself to look, really look before anyone noticed I was free. The glass was cold beneath my palms as I leaned in. The body lay on the table, motionless except for the shallow rise of his chest. Tubes snipped from his arms. Medical monitors blinked in steady hypnotic pulses. I braced myself. Then I looked at the hand. The ring flashed under the harsh surgical lights. Silver, worn, familiar. I inhaled sharply. The swell of grief almost knocked me off balance. It's him, my heart whispered. But then, something else. Something small. Something I would have ignored any other day. A mark on his wrist. I pressed my forehead against the glass. The scar I had seen from the doorway, the one my husband got fixing our kitchen shelf, was inches higher on this man's arm. I blinked, unsure. I checked again. Higher. Wrong place. A chill crawled up my spine. I scanned further. His tattoo, my husband's tiny compass symbol, barely the size of a coin, was normally tucked close to his elbow. But this man's tattoo, it was lower, larger, and blurred around the edges like it had been copied or recently inked. My breath hitched. No, 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 no. I moved to his face. The swelling made identification almost impossible, but even beneath bruises and blood, the nose shape was slightly wrong. The eyebrows too thick, the jaw too narrow, and the skin tone just a shade off. Close, very close, but not him, not my husband. A tremor ran through me so violently the glass rattled. They hadn't staged my husband's accident. They'd staged his body. They dressed a stranger in his belongings, his ring, his ID, His tattoo replicated as best they could. A counterfeit husband. A decoy corpse. My stomach twisted so hard I had to grip the wall to stay upright. The air felt too thin, too sharp, like it was slicing through my lungs. If this wasn't my husband, where was he? Why create a fake version of him? Why try to lure Lee here to identify a body that wasn't his? My pulse spiked, panic swirling into something darker. Fury. I needed answers now. Inside the room, movement caught my eye. A nurse stepped into view. Someone I hadn't seen before. She moved with a clinical calm, but something about her posture felt off. Too stiff. Too practiced. Too deliberate. She approached the table and lifted a small syringe filled with a cloudy liquid. No announcement, no consult, no check. Just a glance over her shoulder to ensure no one was watching. My breath froze. She slid the needle into the stranger's IV line. No hesitation, no concern. Just a smooth, professional push of the plunger. The fluid disappeared into the tube, traveling straight toward the man's veins. The heart monitor beeped. Once, twice, then the rhythm stuttered. I gasped, slopping my hand over my mouth as the beeps turned erratic, too fast, then too slow, then a horrifying flat. Beep. My knees nearly buckled. "No," I whispered, though I knew this man, whoever he was not mine. But watching someone die, deliberately, was something no human can ever truly prepare for. The nurse didn't flinch, didn't rush to resuscitate, didn't shout for help. She simply turned off the monitor. Turned it off. She checked his pulse almost casually, nodded once satisfied. Then she walked to the corner of the room and picked up a clipboard. She wrote something slowly, methodically. I pressed myself flatter against the wall, terrified she'd sense me watching. She placed the sheet on the patient's chest, the fake ID with my husband's name, and clipped it neatly into place. Then, as she walked toward the door, she murmured under her breath, "Time of death confirmed." Confirmed. Confirmed. As if this had been the plan all along. As if this stranger's life existed solely to be ended here today under my husband's name. I stumbled back from the window, shaking so violently I could barely move. My throat burned with bile. My thoughts fractured. Someone orchestrated this. Someone wanted me to see a body that wasn't my husband. Someone wanted me to grieve, to believe I was a widow. But why? And where was my real husband in all of this? Dead elsewhere? Missing? Or alive? Before I could process anything else, a shadow crossed the glass. A man. Tall, broad, wearing civilian clothes. One of the guards. His hand hovered inches from the observation room door handle. He was checking rooms, searching for me. And now he had reached this one. I backed away slowly, heart pounding, mouth dry, aware that if I didn't move, if I didn't run, I'd be the next body someone confirmed. The stranger had died wearing my husband's name. If they caught me, I had no doubt I would too.
I ran. Not loudly, not frantically, just fast enough to stay ahead of the danger, fast enough that the air sliced through my lungs. I ducked into the stairwell, gripping the railing to steady myself as the door eased shut behind me with a soft click. Only then, in the stale, quiet air, did the truth begin to settle over me like dust. A stranger was on that table, dressed as my husband, killed in front of me, presented as if I was meant to believe he was gone. Why? Why go through all of that? Why stage such an elaborate performance? My chest tightened. I sank onto the cold step, hugging my knees to keep my shaking under control. And then, without warning, my mind began replaying things I'd buried, moments I'd brushed off, small cracks I'd ignored because it was easier to believe everything was fine. But nothing was fine. Maybe it hadn't been for a long time. A month ago, we had our worst argument in years. It wasn't even about something important, at least not at first.
I had asked about a missing chunk of money from our joint account. Not a withdrawal, not a bill. It simply wasn't there anymore. He had snapped at me, harder than I'd ever seen. "Don't go through my statements," he'd said. "Some things aren't your business." Not my business. Money we earned together? Money we saved together? Money we used to dream about building a life with? We didn't speak for 2 days afterward. When we finally made up, he apologized with flowers and takeout and soft kisses, but something in his eyes had changed, something tight and worried, like he was hiding a storm behind a thin piece of glass. Then there was the phone. I'd found it by accident, wedged between the couch cushions. A second phone, a cheap burner model, no wallpaper, no apps except the basics. When I confronted him, he laughed it off. "Oh, that. A client left it in my car. I'm holding on to it in case he calls." But the battery was full. The call history had been wiped. There were fingerprints all over it, smudges on the screen. His size, his shape. And I remembered thinking, why does a random client's phone have your fingerprints all over it, Michael? But I pushed the thought aside, like I always did. He wasn't perfect, but he was my husband, my safe place, the man who remembered my coffee order and held my hand through my panic attacks and kissed my forehead when I cried. He couldn't lie. He wouldn't. Except, now I wasn't so sure. Another memory. 2 weeks ago. He'd woken me at 3 a.m., shaking me lightly. "Do you hear that?" I listened. Silence. "What are you talking about?" I groaned. He didn't answer, just stepped toward the window and peeked through the blinds, his silhouette stiff and trembling. "They're watching," he whispered. "Who?" I asked. No answer. The next morning, he acted normal. When I brought up what he said, he brushed it off. Must have been half asleep. Forget it. But his hands trembled when he poured his coffee. He double-checked the locks 3 times before leaving for work. And that night, he installed cameras without telling me. Small ones, hidden in corners, like he didn't want anyone to know except him. At the time, I thought he was just stressed. Now it felt like those were puzzle pieces finally showing their picture. My husband had been scared, deeply scared, paranoid, secretive, hiding something. And whatever it was, it tied to this hospital, this fake death, this grotesque show someone put on for me. For me. Why me? I pressed a trembling hand over my mouth. Maybe the cruelest possibility was true. Maybe he wanted to disappear. Maybe he wanted me to believe he was dead so he wouldn't have to explain himself, so he wouldn't have to face me, so he could cut ties cleanly, permanently. The thought sliced through my chest. Did he stop loving me? Did he get involved in something dangerous? Was he running from debt? From someone he owed? From the law? Or was he trying to protect me? I didn't know, and the not knowing was torture. My breath hitched. Grief, anger, confusion, all of it tangled into something sharp and suffocating. He should have trusted me. If he was scared, he should have told me. I would have helped. I would have stood by him. But instead, he staged a death. My phone buzzed.
I nearly screamed from the shock. The vibration rattled against the middle stair, echoing too loudly. I scrambled for it, afraid someone might hear. The screen lit up. A message. From Michael. My heart stopped. My husband's name, his number, his contact photo. A text from a man who, according to the hospital, was lying dead on a table. The message was short, just 4 words. Do not trust them. I stared at it, mouth dry, mind frozen. Them, the nurses, the guards, the hospital, the people staging his death? My pulse hammered so hard it hurt. I typed back with trembling fingers. Where are you? What's happening? Are you alive? Please answer me. Michael, I'm terrified. But before I could hit send, the message
vanished. Not deleted by me, not archived, just gone, erased, wiped clean, as if it had never existed. The conversation thread reset to the last message we'd exchanged earlier that morning, a grocery list. No, I whispered. No, no. I tapped his name again. The chat opened. Nothing. I scrolled. Empty. No sign of the 4 words. It was impossible. Messages don't delete themselves. Not automatically, not instantly, not without a trace. Unless someone had access. Unless someone intercepted it. Unless someone was manipulating his phone. Or mine. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. If Michael had sent it, he was alive. If someone else wiped it, I was already in deeper danger than I knew. I swallowed hard. Either way, I couldn't trust anyone. Not the hospital, not the people guarding the door, not whoever staged the fake body, and maybe, just maybe, not even my husband. But one thing was clearer than ever. Whatever was happening, it wasn't over. Not even close.
The stairwell door creaked softly. I froze, pressing myself against the wall, ready to sprint if it wasn't who I hoped it was. A soft whisper cut through the silence. "Over here." I turned. It was her, the same nurse who had grabbed me earlier, the one whose eyes filled with terror when she hissed, "Hide! It's a trap!" Now she stood halfway down the stairwell, shaking, wringing her hands as if she couldn't get the fear off her skin. Her badge was turned backward, and her scrubs were stained with something darker than sweat. She scanned the landing one more time, then motioned urgently for me to follow. I hesitated. Every part of me screamed not to trust anyone, but her voice cracked when she whispered, "Please, I don't have much time." Against every instinct, I stepped toward her. She exhaled shakily, as if relieved I hadn't run. We crouched behind the curve of the stairs, tucked just out of sight from the hallway above. The nurse kept glancing upward, listening for footsteps. Finally, she whispered, "You're not supposed to be here." My throat tightened. "I got a call. Someone told me my husband was in an accident." Her eyes widened in horror. "They called you? Oh God, they weren't supposed to know your number." I grabbed her wrist. "Tell me what's going on, please. I saw what they did to that man. He's not my husband." The nurse nodded shakily. "No, he's not." Something inside me cracked. Confirmation didn't ease the pain. It made everything sharper. She took a breath, then another, as if forcing the truth past a lifetime of fear. "Your husband was here earlier today." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Alive?" "Yes. He walked into the ER alone. No injuries. But he looked terrified." Her voice trembled. "He asked to speak to security first, not medical staff. That's unusual, so I listened." She swallowed hard. "He told them he overheard something. Something dangerous. Something he shouldn't have." "What?" I whispered. She bit her lip, glancing nervously toward the stairwell door. "We have people here, doctors, admins, who aren't just medical professionals. They're running a side operation, something illegal, something big." Cold rippled through me. "He knew," I whispered. She nodded. "He overheard them talking in the parking garage. He wasn't supposed to. He tried to report it, but instead of helping him, security detained him." I felt the air leave my lungs. "So they planned to kill him?" I asked. The nurse swallowed. "Not at first. They needed something from him. Information, I think. He tried to run. He escaped their holding room, but left some things behind. They panicked. If he talked, if he exposed them, they'd lose everything." Her voice turned thin. "He became a liability." A dizzy wave crashed over me. "So they staged an accident and a body." "Yes," she breathed. "They moved quickly, too quickly. They grabbed someone who looked similar, someone vulnerable, someone they thought no one would miss, and dressed him in your husband's belongings to make it believable." I pressed a hand to my mouth.
The image of the stranger dying on the operating table seared itself into my mind. "They killed an innocent man," I said, barely able to speak. She nodded slowly. "They needed you to identify the body. Once you confirmed he was dead, they'd have a clean escape. No investigation, no questions." "And my husband?" I whispered. "If they couldn't find him?" "They would," she whispered miserably, "sooner or later. And they wouldn't keep him alive." A cold, icy fear spread through me inch by inch, tightening around my ribs like a vice. "So he's alive. Somewhere." "Yes," her eyes filled with tears. "I think so. I hope so." I leaned against the railing, my legs suddenly weak. The only thing keeping me upright was the raw need to know more. "But why help me?" I whispered. A single tear slid down her cheek. "Because I didn't become a nurse to watch people die. And because I saw him before he escaped." I blinked sharply. "Escaped?" She nodded, trembling harder. "He fought hard. Security was transporting him to another wing. He broke away. I was in the hallway when he ran past." She hesitated. "He was bleeding. From his wrist. They'd put restraints on him." My throat tightened. "He was hurt?" "Yes." She reached into her pocket with shaking fingers. "When he pulled free, the band they tagged him with ripped off. I kept it." She held something out. A hospital wristband, smeared with dried blood, my husband's name printed across it, his birth date, his file number. I took it with trembling hands, my vision blurred, emotion choking me until I could barely inhale. It was real. He was here. He was alive. He fought back. He escaped. Tears filled my eyes, spilling hot and uncontrollable. The nurse placed a hand on my shoulder, her voice barely audible. "He didn't leave you. He wasn't trying to disappear. He was running for his life." I clutched the wristband to my chest as tears streamed down my face. I had wanted 100 answers. I expected a handful of lies. I had braced myself for horror, but nothing prepared me for hope. He escaped. He was out there, somewhere, in this hospital or beyond it. My husband was alive, bleeding, terrified, and fighting to survive. Before I could speak, footsteps echoed above us, heavy, fast. The nurse's eyes widened in panic. She grabbed my arm. "They're looking for us." Then in a whisper, so faint I barely heard it, she said, "You need to leave, and you need to find him before they do." The nurse vanished as quickly as she appeared, slipping through the stairwell door and leaving me alone with the weight of everything she had just revealed, and the bloody wristband clenched in my shaking hand. I pressed my back against the concrete wall, heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. My husband wasn't dead. He wasn't missing by choice. He was running, hunted, terrified, alone. And I was the only one who could find him before they did. I forced myself to stand. Every part of me trembled, but I moved because stopping felt like dying, because breathing hurt less when I had a purpose, because the wristband in my fist felt like a promise and a warning. He escaped, but maybe not far. The nurse had mentioned cameras, security, restraints, an escape attempt. Hospitals had surveillance everywhere, even the older ones like this. If he had run, someone must have caught it on camera. So I made my way down to the lower-level corridors. They were quiet, sanitized, unnervingly still, like the hospital's heartbeat had stopped. I ducked into an alcove near the security office, peering around the corner. Inside, 2 guards stood near a bank of monitors, drinking coffee, chatting quietly. One of them I recognized, the tall one who'd been blocking the OR door earlier. My stomach twisted. There was no way I could walk in there. They were the same people who'd tried to kill my husband. They'd gladly do the same to anyone looking for him. But right next to the security office, a smaller room, a forgotten archive space. Door cracked open. Lights off. My pulse jumped. I slipped toward it, pushing the door fully open. Inside, dusty stacks of old filing boxes lined one wall, but the real treasure was on the metal desk, an old, clunky terminal used for camera backup logs. No lock screen, no password, just an interface from 20 years ago asking me to select a date. Please, please, please. I clicked the current day. The screen showed a list of cameras, each with timestamps. Loading, loading. And then, grainy footage flickered to life. I skimmed through until something caught my breath in my throat. There, a man, my husband, bursting out of a side room, stumbling, clutching his wrist. The band must have torn off moments later. He looked frantic, exhausted, terrified. Blood streaked his forearm. His hair was matted with sweat. But he was alive. He kept glancing over his shoulder as he ran, almost slipping on the tiled floor. My stomach clenched watching him limp, watching him hide behind a vending machine, watching him peek around corners as if death might be following him. My chest tightened painfully. He wasn't running away from me. He was running towards survival. Tears blurred the screen. I scrubbed forward through the footage. He ran toward the exit near the ambulance bay, but then suddenly he turned back, veering into a different hallway. Why? I breathed. Where were you going? Then I realized he wasn't just running from danger. He was running to someone. Someone he trusted, or was desperate to warn. I clicked through more footage, another hallway, then another, until finally I reached the camera facing the back lot. And what I saw made my blood run cold. My husband burst through the exit doors, collapsing against the wall for a second, panting, gripping his ribs. Then, someone stepped out of the shadows. A man. Tall, broad shoulders, wearing a dark hoodie. My breath caught in my throat. My heart skipped, because I knew that silhouette. Kyle? I whispered. My husband's brother. Kyle! The same Kyle who moved abroad 6 months ago. The same Kyle who only sent brief, cryptic messages to the family. The same Kyle who hadn't visited, called, or even liked a single social media post in months. But here he was, at this hospital, at night, waiting. My pulse hammered so violently I felt dizzy. Why was he here? How did he know my husband was in danger? Why didn't he call me, warn me, tell me anything? I clicked further through the footage. My husband stumbled toward him, saying something I couldn't hear. Kyle grabbed his shoulders, steadying him, pulling him into a hurried embrace. For a brief moment, I saw relief flood my husband's face. Raw, desperate relief. Then Kyle said something short, urgent. My husband shook his head violently, refusing. Kyle grabbed my husband's arm, pulling him toward the back of the lot, just out of camera view. And then, the footage cut. Not just stopped, cut. A full minute missing. A corrupted file. Tampered with. My whole body went numb with dread. Someone didn't want that moment seen. Someone erased the part that mattered most. I sat on the edge of the metal desk, burying my face in my hands. A sob ripped through me, raw, ugly, uncontrollable. The kind of sound you never expect to make, the kind that comes only when the world has shifted so violently that nothing feels real anymore. Why didn't I see the signs? Why didn't he tell me? Why didn't I push harder when he acted strange? Why didn't I trust my instincts when things didn't add up? I had been blind, comfortably blind, desperately blind. And now my husband was somewhere between alive and dead, lost in a nightmare I didn't understand. My tears dripped onto the keyboard. I wiped my face fiercely, hating myself for breaking down when every second mattered. Then, A metallic sound echoed in the hallway. I froze. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. I leaned backwards, peering through the crack in the door. The tall guard, the same one from the OR. He was scanning rooms. My rage and fear twisted into something sharp and electric. They were closing in. But I had seen enough to know one thing for certain. My husband wasn't alone when he left this hospital. He left with Kyle, his brother, a man I trusted, but now wasn't sure I recognized at all. A man who shouldn't even have been in the country. Why was he here? And more importantly, what did he want with my husband? Because the way he grabbed him, the urgency in his movements, didn't look like rescue. It looked like capture. And suddenly, the question wasn't just, where is my husband? It was, who can I even trust anymore?
I wandered the hospital's dim back corridors like a ghost drifting between two worlds. One where my husband was alive and terrified, and another where he was already dead, as neatly and conveniently as they wanted me to believe. My breath was shallow, my thoughts splintered, my heartbeat too loud in my ears. But the deeper I went, the clearer the pattern became. None of this was random. None of this was an accident. Someone wanted me here. Someone wanted me to see that body, that stranger, and swear under oath that it was my husband. But why me? Why target me? I stepped into an abandoned consultation room and shut the door quietly, pressing my back against the cold wood. For the first time since this nightmare began, I let silence wash over me. My mind started stitching the pieces together, frantic but focused. The blocked phone call, the panicked nurse, the men guarding the operating room, the surgeon's whisper, "She's early." The dead stranger with my husband's ring. They didn't just expect me, they needed me. I imagined the paperwork, the immediate legal closure, the hospital issuing the death certificate, insurance, assets, digital locks, bank accounts, everything tied to me verifying that the body was his. A fake death only worked if the next of kin confirmed it. I paced the small room, dragging a shaking hand through my hair. So I was never meant to save him. I was meant to bury him. A wave of nausea rolled over me. They had wanted me to walk into that OR and sob and collapse and whisper, "Yes, that's him." And once I did, my husband would be dead in the eyes of the law. No questions, no investigation. Case closed. But if this was all meticulously staged, then where was he? And why did they want him gone? I closed my eyes and inhaled. There was something I was missing, something that tugged at the back of my mind like a thread waiting to be pulled. The nurse's words echoed again. He overheard something dangerous. He was planning to expose the corrupt group. They want him dead. If that was true, then I was collateral damage. A pawn in a game I never knew existed. I swallowed hard and forced myself to focus. Think. 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 He'd been acting strange lately, avoiding certain calls, staring out windows like the shadows outside were watching him. And that second phone I found hidden beneath our dresser, he'd lied about that. He'd said it was for a work project. But now I wasn't sure what to believe. If he was running, maybe he was trying to protect me. The thought hit me hard and fast, leaving me breathless. What if this whole staged death wasn't just to erase him, but to corner me? A hollow ache bloomed in my chest. The hospital felt tighter, darker. I pressed my palms against the metal table in the room and leaned forward, grounding myself. I needed answers, something solid, anything. I dug into my pocket and pulled out my car keys. They jingled weakly in my trembling hand. For a second, I couldn't remember why they felt important, until a memory surfaced.
When I arrived at the hospital, a man in a dark jacket had brushed past me in the parking lot. I didn't think of anything of it then. There was too much panic, too much urgency. But what if? A sudden spike of dread crawled up my spine. I rushed down to the parking lot. Every step echoed like a countdown. My car sat exactly where I left it, the night's cold air frosting its windows. I unlocked it, slid into the driver's seat, and turned on the dome light. Everything looked normal at first. Then I saw it. There, placed neatly in the cup holder, was a ring. Not just any ring. My husband's actual wedding ring. My hand flew to my chest as if my heart might fall out. I lifted the ring with shaking fingertips. I knew every dent, every tiny scratch. It was his. I'd kissed this ring on our wedding night. I turned it nervously on his finger when he comforted me during hard times. This wasn't a replica. This wasn't staged. This was real. Oh my God, my voice cracked. They never had his ring. Which meant the ring they put on the fake body was planted, carefully, deliberately, to deceive me. Tears stung my eyes. The trembling got worse. Someone had been in my car. Someone had left this ring as a message, or a warning, or a breadcrumb. But which? If my husband didn't lose his ring in some accident, if he didn't leave it behind voluntarily, then the only explanation was he was leaving clues. He wanted me to find this. Or someone else wanted me to question everything. I pressed the ring into my palm so tightly it left a mark. I whispered, "Why me? Why bring me into this?" And then the real horror hit. If they needed me to confirm the death, if they were desperate to close the case, then they wouldn't stop with a fake body. They'd come after me next, because a widow who refuses to play along is inconvenient. A witness who knows the truth is dangerous. And I already knew too much. I looked through the windshield at the sprawling hospital, a building full of people who wanted me to sign away my husband's life. My breath shook out in a cold, terrified whisper. They're not just after him. They're after me. And now, there was no turning back. For a long moment, I simply sat in my car with my husband's real wedding ring burning in my palm, my chest rising and falling like I'd run miles. The ring felt like a heartbeat, his heartbeat. Proof he existed. Proof he was still out there. But so were the people hunting him. I couldn't stay here, couldn't go home, couldn't trust the hospital, the police, anyone. There was only one person left who might know something, one person I'd just seen on the security footage walking away with my husband. His brother, a man who was supposed to be in another country, which meant he was either part of the trap or the only one who could help me escape it. I started the engine and tightened my grip on the wheel as I sped out of the parking lot, my mind racing faster than the car. The footage showed them leaving through the east exit. I knew the area, a strip of older clinics and unused offices. If they wanted somewhere private, it would be there. The streets blurred as I drove, headlights light. For a long moment, I simply sat in my car with my husband's real wedding ring burning in my palm, my chest rising and falling like I'd run miles. The ring felt like a heartbeat, his heartbeat, proof he existed, proof he was still out there. But so were the people hunting him. I couldn't stay here, couldn't go home, couldn't trust the hospital, the police, anyone. There was only one person left who might know something, one person I'd just seen on the security footage walking away with my husband, his brother, a man who was supposed to be in another country, which meant he was either part of the trap or the only one who could help me escape it. I started the engine and tightened my grip on the wheel as I sped out of the parking lot, my mind racing faster than the car. The footage showed them leaving through the east exit. I knew the area, a strip of older clinics and unused offices. If they wanted somewhere private, it would be there. The streets blurred as I drove, headlights sliding across empty sidewalks. Every shadow felt like a threat. Every car behind me felt like a tale. By the time I reached the alley behind the abandoned imaging center, my hands were numb with tension. I spotted movement near the dumpsters. A figure stepped forward, hood pulled up, shoulders tense. My heart nearly stopped. "Michael?" I whispered. My husband's brother turned slowly. The hood fell back. His eyes widened with shock and something deeper, fear. "You shouldn't be here," he hissed, rushing toward me. "God, why did you come?" "I saw you on the footage," I said, voice trembling. "You were with him. Where is he? What is happening?" He checked the alley entrance, scanned the rooftops, and then grabbed my arm, pulling me into the shadows. "You're being watched. You have no idea how deep this goes." "Then tell me," I said, my voice breaking. "Please, I can't keep running blind." He exhaled shakily, fighting himself, then pinched the bridge of his nose. "Okay," he said, "but once you hear this, there's no going back." I swallowed hard. "There's no going back anyway." Michael leaned against the cold brick wall like the truth was heavy enough for him to collapse. "It started months ago. Your husband, my brother, stumbled into something at the hospital. Not by accident. He was helping a security contractor install new cameras. One of them caught something it wasn't supposed to." "What did he see?" I whispered. His expression tightened. A body. Not dead, drugged, being prepped to be declared deceased. My stomach flipped. "They weren't treating accident victims," he continued. "They were repurposing them, stealing identities, harvesting organs, faking deaths, and shipping the victims to private buyers overseas." I covered my mouth as bile rose in my throat. "He didn't believe it at first," Michael said, "until he kept seeing names disappear from the system, until one night a man he'd spoken to earlier turned up on an operating table as a John Doe." My body went cold. My husband's paranoia, his sleepless nights, his unexplained injuries, the second phone, the way he would stare out the window like someone was hunting him. "It was real," I whispered. "All of it." Michael nodded slowly. "Yeah, he gathered evidence. Too much evidence. And people inside found out. They came after him, hard." "Why me?" I choked out. "Why target me?" His eyes softened with something like regret. "They couldn't find him. They needed leverage. Someone he'd walk into a trap to save. Someone who would identify the body they staged." The breath punched out of my lungs. "So the fake accident, the stranger on the table, that was all to get me to confirm his death?" "Yes. They wanted the legal paperwork, the closure, everything tied up before your husband could go public." I leaned back against the wall, dizzy. "They were manipulating me," I whispered. "Using me." "And they still are," he said quietly. My legs nearly gave out. "Michael, is he alive?" Michael pressed his lips together, then nodded. "Yes, but barely. They hit him with something earlier tonight, a sedative or worse. He ran, but he's fading. He's been bleeding." "Oh, God." I covered my mouth, fighting tears. "Where is he?" "He was supposed to meet me here," Michael said, glancing around the alley. "I stepped out to scout, and when I came back, he was gone." My heart lurched. "Gone?" I repeated. "Gone where? Did they take him?" "I don't know." His voice cracked with frustration. "But he left this." He pulled something from his pocket, a torn strip from a hospital wristband smeared with blood. My breath hitched. "That's his handwriting," I whispered, tracing the shakily scribbled letters. On the tiny plastic piece, in red streaked ink, "Not safe. They follow. Find me. Trust no one." I clutched it to my chest, tears sliding down my face. My husband had been here. He'd been close, hurt, terrified, running for his life. Michael stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "He loves you, you know. You were the only thing he kept saying, even when he could barely stand." The ache in my chest cracked wide open. "But we're running out of time," Michael said. "They know he escaped the hospital. They'll sweep this district next. If they catch him tonight, it's over. They'll finish what they started." I looked at the ring in my hand. Warm. Real. Alive. My husband was out there, bleeding, hunting for safety, hunted by monsters. And I was done being their pawn. I wiped my tears with shaking fingers. "Then we find him first. No more hiding, no more running blind." Michael nodded, a grim fire lighting in his eyes. "Then stay close, because from this point on, they're coming for both of us." A cold wind swept through the alley, carrying the distant echo of sirens. And I felt it, deep in my bones. The trap wasn't behind us. It was closing in.
Michael led me down a side corridor I'd never noticed before, the kind of hallway most staff avoided after dark. The flickering fluorescent lights gave the walls a sickly green hue, peeling paint revealing decades of neglect. The air smelled of mildew and antiseptic, a memory of old hospital wings no longer in use. I followed closely, clutching my husband's wedding ring in one hand and the blood-streaked wristband in the other. Every shadow seemed to move, every echo a whisper of danger. But fear was now tempered with hope, a sharp, unbearable hope. He was alive. He had fought. He was out there somewhere. Michael stopped at a rusted, half-open door. "He's in there," he whispered. "The old wing. I scouted it a few hours ago. He hid here after escaping the main building." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. My pulse was deafening. "He's okay," I whispered, almost afraid to ask. Michael shook his head. "He's hurt. He's bleeding, but he's alive." I stepped forward cautiously, the floorboards groaning beneath my weight. Each step felt like a lifetime. My chest constricted with anticipation and dread. And then I saw him. He was slumped against the wall at the far end of the hallway, partially hidden in shadows. His shirt was torn and bloodied, bruises marred his face, and his hair clung to his sweaty forehead. But he was alive. He was real. I called his name softly. "Michael." His head lifted, eyes wide, recognition flashing. I thought," his voice broke. "I didn't know if you'd come." I ran to him, stumbling over my own feet. He tried to stand, but his legs gave out. I caught him, holding him tight, burying my face in his shoulder. My tears soaked his bloodied shirt. His arms trembled around me as he clutched my back, his strength spent. "I'm here," I whispered, my voice muffled by his chest. "I'm not leaving you. I'm not letting them take you." He shook his head weakly, trying to form words, but only managed to hoarse, "I'm sorry. I didn't want you to get involved." I pulled back slightly, cupping his face in my hands. "Don't apologize. Just survive. That's all that matters right now. You're alive. That's all I care about." He laughed softly, a shaky, broken sound, and pressed his forehead against mine. "I thought I'd lost you." "I never left. I never will." We held each other in the dim, abandoned wing, tears mingling, silent sobs filling the hollow space. After months of terror, confusion, and grief, the simple act of holding him again felt like reclaiming the world. But the moment was short-lived. A faint click echoed from the hallway outside.
The sound of metal shoes on tile. Michael stiffened. I felt it before he spoke. They found us. I pulled back slightly, scanning the hallway. Shadows moved, too deliberate to be random. Figures appeared at both ends of the wing, surgeons in scrubs, their faces hidden beneath surgical masks, weapons glinting in their hands. "They're coming in," Michael whispered. "We're trapped." Panic surged through me like wildfire. My husband's arm tightened around mine as we pressed ourselves against the wall. The space between us and the approaching threat felt impossibly small, the air thick and heavy with fear. "Why here?" I whispered, voice trembling. "They know the old wing. It's isolated, easy to corner us." His eyes darted to the exit doors, locked. He tried one, they wouldn't budge. The other side of the corridor ended in a brick wall. I felt my stomach twist. We were trapped, alone, injured, cornered by people who had already proven they would kill without hesitation. My husband's eyes met mine, panicked yet fierce. He whispered, "I'm not going down. Not here. Not like this. We fight." I nodded, gripping his hand tightly. "We fight. Together." The footsteps grew louder, echoing ominously through the abandoned wing. The surgeons emerged from the shadows, methodical, calm, terrifyingly prepared. Their eyes were cold, unfeeling. Michael leaned close, his forehead against mine again. "Stay close," he whispered. "We only have a chance if we move now." I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded, forcing my fear into something solid, something I could use. The first surgeon raised a hand, signaling the others. The air felt electric, each second stretching, each heartbeat a countdown. I tightened my grip on my husband's hand and whispered, "We're not done. Not yet." He nodded weakly, and together we took a breath, ready to face whatever came next. The wing was silent for a second, almost deceptively so, as the figures closed in. And in that quiet, terrifying pause, I realized we might be trapped, but we weren't defeated. Not yet.
The abandoned wing felt like a coffin, every shadow pressed against us, every footstep from the corrupt surgeons echoing like a countdown. Michael gripped my hand tightly, his bloodied fingers cutting into mine, and we moved toward the far end of the hallway, where a rusted service door led to the hospital's maintenance tunnels. I glanced at him. "This way, hurry!" He nodded, limping slightly but keeping pace. The dim light of the corridor barely reached the metal door. With a shared heave, we pushed it open. A stale, mechanical smell hit us, the scent of years of disuse, oil, and damp concrete. The tunnels twisted and turned like a snake, narrow and claustrophobic, forcing us to move single file. Every creak of metal, every drip of water set my nerves on edge. I imagined the surgeons discovering our escape, their footsteps thundering behind us, catching up. But we had no choice. This was our only chance. As we moved, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, the recording I had captured in the OR of the surgeons discussing the staged death. My fingers shook as I activated the audio, letting it play softly, just enough for a potential listener in the tunnels to hear. Michael glanced at me, a mixture of fear and relief in his eyes. "You're going to use that?" I nodded. "If they catch us, I'll play it. They've already done enough. If we die here, the world hears everything." He swallowed hard. "I should have told you. All of it. I didn't want to drag you into my nightmare." His voice broke. "I thought if I kept you in the dark, you'd be safe." "No," I said softly. "You tried to protect me. That's all anyone can do. You didn't fail. I forgive you." His eyes glistened with unshed tears, and he pulled me into a weak but desperate hug. For a moment, the chaos outside didn't exist. There was just us, clinging to the fragile thread of survival. The tunnels twisted again, a sharp turn leading us to a ladder descending deeper into shadow. Michael took the first step, testing its stability. I followed, careful not to make a sound. Each rung creaked under our weight, every echo amplifying our fear. We reached a narrow horizontal tunnel that seemed almost impossible to crawl through. The air was thick, humid, and smelled of rust, but there was no turning back. Michael went first, dragging himself along, and I followed, my phone recording softly, capturing the memory of this flight in case it became our only weapon. "I can't believe we're actually doing this," I whispered, half laughing, half crying. Michael chuckled. "Grim. Believe it. We either make it or the evidence goes public. That's our leverage." Every second stretched endlessly as we crawled. I felt the metal scrape my arms and legs, but adrenaline drowned out the pain. The sound of approaching footsteps from above occasionally vibrated through the metal, making us freeze, holding our breath until the echoes faded. Finally, we saw faint light ahead, a ventilation grate leading to an outside wall. Michael went first, pushing the grate aside with surprising strength. I followed, squeezing through the narrow opening into the cool night air. We collapsed on the grass outside, the hospital looming behind us like a silent predator. I breathed deeply, filling my lungs with freedom and fear in equal measure. Michael lay beside me, bleeding, exhausted, but alive. I pressed my hand to his chest, feeling the steady, ragged beat of his heart. "We made it," I whispered. He shook his head, exhausted, shaking off disbelief. "Barely, but yes, thanks to you." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, holding the audio recording like a lifeline. If anyone tries to come after us, we release this. Everything. What they did, what they planned, it all goes public. His hand found mine, squeezing tightly. "You didn't just save me, you saved us." I leaned my forehead against his bloodied shoulder, my tears soaking his bloodied shirt. "We're together. That's what matters. Nothing else counts." He finally smiled, faint but genuine. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I thought I could handle it alone." "You were protecting me," I said softly, "and that's enough. I understand. I forgive you." For the first time in hours, or maybe days, there was a calmness, fragile but real. The chaos of the hospital, the terror, the lies, the traps, all of it seemed distant for a moment, replaced by the simple reality. He was alive, and we were together. We didn't speak for a long while. The night air cooled our sweat, our breaths mingling. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed, but we were no longer inside their trap. For now, we were free. But freedom felt fragile. Every shadow could hide someone from the hospital. Every sound could signal pursuit. Still, in that dark field, surrounded by the night and silence, I finally allowed myself to hope. We had survived. Together. And now we would fight, not just to escape, but to reveal the truth, because they thought they could control the story. But we had the evidence, and we had each other, and that was more powerful than anything they could throw at us.
By the time we emerged from the maintenance tunnels and stumbled into the cold morning air, my legs felt like they were made of vibrating wires, tight, shaking, ready to snap. But we were alive. And in my pocket, wrapped in a sweat-soaked cloth, was the audio recording that could bring the entire operation down. I didn't let it go, not even for a second. 2 hours later, we sat inside a small, windowless room at the State Investigation Bureau. The walls were a dull gray, but compared to the fluorescent nightmare of the hospital floors, they looked like freedom. My husband sat beside me, his jaw tense, knuckles white. Across from us, a pair of investigators listened to the recording again. Hearing Alexi's voice, smooth, confident, dripping with arrogance, sent a shiver up my spine. "This system sustains itself because no one questions it," he said on the recording. "Patients who can't pay become assets. Bodies become investments." Hearing my own voice responding, shaky but defiant, felt surreal. I had faced him, played the part, survived. Barely. The investigators paused the audio. The woman leading the interview leaned forward, elbows on the table, expression tight. "This is bigger than we thought. We suspected organ trafficking, financial fraud, but this is a coordinated enterprise." "It's a machine," I said quietly. "They've been doing it for years. But you can stop them now." She nodded slowly, almost reverently. My husband cleared his throat, rubbing a hand over his face. "They'll come after us. You know that, right?" "Oh, they won't get the chance," the second investigator muttered. He snapped the audio recorder shut. "With what you've given us, we can move immediately. Arrest warrants, full shutdown, federal intervention." I exhaled shakily. It was finally happening. The raid took place that evening. Though we weren't allowed to be physically present, the investigators kept us updated as events unfolded. I sat in a safe house, staring at the wall-mounted TV as news alerts broke across every channel. Illegal organ trafficking ring uncovered in top city hospital. Several high-ranking medical staff arrested. Hospital operations suspended in federal probe. My husband stood behind me, hands on my shoulders. His touch was warm, but trembling. I watched the footage, armed officers swarming the hospital, doctors in white coats being led out in handcuffs, patients being evacuated, files and computers carried out as evidence. Alexi's face flashed on the screen for a moment, a mugshot, expression stiff with fury. My throat tightened. "We did it," my husband whispered, but my voice cracked. "We survived it." He knelt beside me, resting his forehead against my arm. "I should have told you everything from the start. I kept things from you because I thought I was protecting you. I didn't want you pulled into the danger I already suspected." I sighed, feeling the weight of the last few days settle deep into my chest. "You were trying to shield me. I know that now. But we protect each other, remember? You don't have to carry things alone." His eyes glistened. "I'm so sorry." I touched his cheek. "I forgive you. We made it through, and we're here." He closed his eyes and exhaled, like a man finally allowed to let go.
Hours later, the investigators returned with their final instruction. "Your husband needs to enter temporary protection," the lead agent said. The group had files on him, anonymous threats, surveillance images. He's a high-priority target for retaliation. I felt my stomach drop. For how long? A few weeks, maybe less. It depends how quickly we can dismantle the entire network. My husband nodded grimly. "Whatever keeps her safe." "Both of you," the investigator corrected. But my husband only shook his head. "She can't disappear. She has a life. I'll go." I grabbed his hand hard. "We just got through this together. Don't make me face the aftermath alone." He squeezed back gently. "This is the aftermath, but it won't be forever. Just long enough to make sure nobody comes after us." My throat tightened. I wanted to argue, scream, demand a different outcome, but I saw the truth in his eyes. This was the safest path. "I'll wait for you," I whispered, "and I'll come back." When the agents escorted him out, the room felt too big, too empty. I pressed my hand to the glass window and watched him walk away until he turned the corner and vanished. Some victories required sacrifices. I just hadn't expected one so soon. I wiped my eyes and turned. Across the table, a small envelope sat, one the agent said had been left for me at the station. No sender, no markings. My heart thudded. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single folded page. The handwriting was neat, graceful, slightly slanted. "You saved more lives than you know." Beneath it was a second sentence. "Don't look for me, but don't forget me either." There was no signature, but I knew. The nurse. The one who had risked everything to help me. The one who had warned me, guided me, slipped me keys and access codes, and whispered truths no one else dared to say. The one who vanished the morning we escaped the tunnels, before the raid, before she could be questioned. A ghost in scrubs. I pressed the note to my chest. "Thank you," I whispered to the empty room. Her disappearance hit me harder than I expected. She didn't wait for credit, didn't stay for safety. She had slipped out into the world like someone who had survived it before and knew how to stay ahead of danger. The investigators could shut down the hospital, they could arrest the criminals, they could dismantle the entire operation. But they couldn't catch someone who didn't want to be found. And in some strange way, I was glad. She'd done her part, more than any of us. I folded the note and tucked it into my pocket, beside the recorder that had changed everything. Tomorrow, I would start rebuilding my life. Tonight, I would honor hers. Because she was right. I had saved more lives than I knew.
And maybe, just maybe, I had saved my own.
Months had passed, and the world felt quieter somehow, still bright, still breathing, yet carrying a weight that never fully lifted. The hospital was gone, the criminal network dismantled, and my husband was finally safe, though not untouched by the past. He moved slower now, careful with himself, but present, whole, alive. Our days settled into a fragile rhythm. Grocery runs, morning coffee on the balcony, the hum of everyday life that used to feel mundane now felt like a blessing. There were nights when I woke drenched in sweat, reliving the fluorescent lights of the OR, the shadowed hallways, the sound of footsteps chasing us through the tunnels. But those nights grew fewer as time passed, replaced by mornings of quiet laughter, stolen glances, and the comfort of his hand in mine. We talked about everything, what we had lost, what we had endured. Not to dredge the pain, but to remember, to honor what had almost taken him from me. Every word was a thread in the delicate fabric of our new life. One evening, I opened a small wooden box I kept hidden in the top drawer of my dresser. Inside lay the fake wedding ring, the one placed on the body that wasn't my husband's. I turned it over in my fingers, feeling its cold metal, smooth but lifeless. It hurt to hold it. Yet I couldn't throw it away. I couldn't let it go. It was a reminder of the day I almost confirmed a death that never happened, of the trap set not to end a life, but to manipulate and deceive, of the moment I realized how easily the truth could be twisted and how fiercely we had fought to reclaim it. I slipped the fake ring onto a chain and hung it around my neck, not as jewelry, not as a keepsake, but as a talisman of vigilance, of survival, of remembering that some truths are worth chasing no matter the danger. My husband came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady thrum of his heartbeat, a rhythm I had thought I'd lost forever. "We made it," he whispered. "Yes," I replied, "but we'll never forget." We stood there in silence, letting the night wrap around us. The past still lingered, shadows and corners of memory, but we faced it together. And in that togetherness, we found hope. Because life, as fragile and fleeting as it is, could still be reclaimed, could still be rebuilt. I closed my eyes and pressed my fingers to the ring around my neck. Sometimes the deadliest traps aren't meant to kill you. They're meant to make you stop looking for the truth. And I would never stop.